It appears that congestion pricing is fast approaching for the city. While the tolls are not set to take effect until next spring at the earliest, the infrastructure, well, that's already in place in many parts of the city. At the same time, several areas are planning for changes to the way drivers will enter Manhattan.
So last month, New York Congressman Torres announced plans for a new fast charging station hub in the Bronx for electric vehicles. It's one of several investments the Bronx has made as the city moves towards congestion pricing. Guess who's here? Congressman Torres. Nice to have you back on Good Day.
Always an honor to be here.
So, I mean, can you believe how fast the MTA is working with getting those stanchions, those toll stanchions? And we're like a year and a half away from that.
I guess the MTA can be a well-oiled machine when it chooses to be, but the stakes are high. Look, congestion pricing, for all its controversy, will radically reduce air pollution. It will radically reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the service of combating climate change. But the most important piece is creating a funding stream for the MTA so that we can make $15 billion worth of capital improvements. Public transit is the lifeblood of our city, and our crumbling infrastructure, including our public transit system, is an international embarrassment.
But at what cost? I mean, I know you were considering it. I know you've been on both sides of the issue, and almost a year ago to the day, you were concerned about this. You were concerned for your district in the Bronx because you said it was going to bring a lot of trucks in, not good for the environment, not good for the people who live there. What changed your mind?
So I originally had concerns about the congestion pricing plan because the environmental assessment indicated there would be a diversion of diesel truck traffic to the Cross Bronx Expressway in the South Bronx. And I made it crystal clear that I'm not going to allow the Bronx to be a dumping ground for Manhattan's diesel truck traffic. The governor heard those concerns, and to her credit, she committed to $155 million in investments.
In the Bronx?
Specifically for the Bronx to address public health needs and environmental needs.
But it's almost like they're creating the problem and then they're going to solve it with the money they gave you.
I think the benefits of the investments will far exceed the cost. So it's $35 million for clean trucks, $20 million for EV charging infrastructure, $20 million for a Bronx asthma clinic, $15 million to replace the dirtiest fossil fuel trucks in the Hunts Point Terminal Market, which will reduce particulate matter pollution by 90%, which means lower rates of asthma, lower rates of asthma hospitalization. So I do believe it's going to be a breakthrough for the public health of the Bronx.
But is it really in the big picture of things? Because when you look at EV cars, it's less than 1% of cars that are registered in New York City. Manhattan having the most, Bronx having probably more towards the least end of things. So is that really the best trade-off that you can get in terms of when you're saying this was going to be bad for us, but here's a trade-off? Could you have gotten something more?
Well, I think there's going to be rapid growth in the EV market. In order to have an electric vehicle, you need EV charging infrastructure. And the borough president and I just joined a company known as Revel to announce the largest EV infrastructure in the history of the Bronx. And unlike most EV chargers, which could take 8 to 10 hours to charge an electric vehicle, these chargers are ultra fast, 8 to 10 minutes. It's going to be the electric equivalent of a gas station. Just like it takes a few minutes to fill your pump, it should take a few minutes to charge your electric vehicle. I think that's the wave of the future. When
you talk to people in your district, and which most people are opposed to congestion pricing, that's we hear time and time again, what do they say to you?
Look, I think no one wants to pay the cost of congestion pricing, and no one wants to pay the cost of anything, right? But
because listen, everything's pretty high as it is,
and the cost of living is crushing.
Right.
But the MTA is the lifeblood of our city. And it's easy for politicians to be critics of congestion pricing and to demagogue the issue. It's much harder to solve the problem. And so in the absence of congestion pricing, what's the alternate strategy for generating the $15 billion in capital improvements that the MTA needs?
There has to be an alternative strategy when politicians are elected to do the will of the people, and the people don't want it.
The critics are putting forward no alternative.
Well, the problem is, I think a lot of people don't trust the MTA. They think it's a big, failed bureaucracy where the money goes in this abyss and you never see it again.
Well, keep in mind that the revenues from congestion pricing will go not toward operations, but toward capital. And people can see capital improvements with their own eyes.
I hope so. Can we also talk about something else that's kind of irking New Yorkers, the migrant situation? And as you know, the mayor has begged the President of the United States. The governor has begged the President of the United States. Why isn't the President of the United States listening?
Look, for me, I'm frustrated with the President's hands-off approach. to the migrant crisis. It's overwhelming the city. I think 90,000 people have entered the intake system. 50,000 people remain in the city's care. You know, our country should be a land of opportunity for immigrants, for asylum seekers, but that burden has to be distributed equitably across the country. The failure of our immigration system cannot fall solely on the shoulders of New York.
What needs to be done? I mean, do they have to stop at the borders? I mean, Congressman, I mean, we're getting, and people are freaking out because they're putting migrants in Creedmoor. That's a 1,000-bed tent facility. That's going to fill up by the end of the week. We're getting 2,500 migrants a week in New York.
So I think first we need more emergency funding for New York City. The Department of Homeland Security has only appropriated $140 million, which falls catastrophically short of the $12 billion hole that the migrant crisis is likely to leave in the city budget. And second, we need work authorization. The migrants who are here want to work.
They're already working. Do you see the e-bikes outside the hotels and tents?
But not everyone has the authorization to work.
Well, I know, but they're working.
And that would be, and work authorization would enable the migrants to provide for themselves.
Just why can't we say work? We're not hearing anything from the President of the United States. How much longer do we wait?
The President should issue an executive order granting work authorization. And it could be done without Congress.
So by authorizing that executive order, is that almost saying, hey, I do have a problem in my hands and I might be taking some of the blame because I'm not doing anything? Is there a politic game going on behind this as to why he might not be addressing this? Because it's not going to look good for him as he runs for re-election.
Look, I mean, I would leave those questions to the White House. I'm not going to speculate about his political motives, but most people prefer to avoid the issue of immigration because it's politically the most divisive in Washington, D.C. But the crisis is overwhelming New York, and it's unsustainable.
Do you think this could be bad for the Democrats? I was reading something in the Times where they mentioned it, and they love their Democrats.
For me, it's not about Democrat or Republican. It's about doing what's best for the city of New York.
You're right.
Speaking about doing what's best for the city, your area, you're kind of pushing this whole thing about $10 million for small business loans, and that's a great help for people in the Bronx. What is that going to be doing to kind of transform entrepreneurs in your area?
Look, the road to the American dream is entrepreneurship and small business, but in the United States there's a severe shortage of small business lending, especially in places like the Bronx. The big banks only want to give big loans to big businesses, leaving small businesses behind. So the borough president and I, as well as a number of organizations, are establishing a $10 million fund to support small businesses in the Bronx.
And just to follow up, not just small businesses, probably women of color, because I feel like they're also underrepresented in terms of entrepreneurship.
And not only are we going to provide $10 million in federal funding, but we, the federal government, will guarantee up to 85% of the loan to generate more lending.
Well, that's good positive news. Hey, we really appreciate you being here.
Always a pleasure.
Do you know who's coming in about a half hour?
Who's coming?
Congressman George Santos.
Oh, wow.
If you...
Because you let anyone come. the bar's pretty low here.
Well, he is in your Congress, isn't he?
Yeah, well,
Ouch.
Not all members of Congress are created equal.
He's in your House of Congress.
Not all members of Congress are created equal, but I wish him well in his federal prosecution. So,
is that what you would you, if you had a chance to say something to him in the halls of Good Day New York? Is that what you would say?
I mean, he should resign. He has no credibility with his constituents, no credibility with his colleagues. His ability to govern has collapsed, and if he had any decency and integrity, he would resign.
The Santos Act, what's going on with that?
Look, we hope to pass it.
And what does it stand for quickly? Because
stop another non-truthful office seeker. So,
but,
so that will be his legacy in the...
listen, he's in his own league, but politicians have always been kind of clouded in deception.
Look, it's one thing to lie, which is wrong. It is something else to invent a whole new existence, and he has lied about every aspect of his life, and his lies are so egregious that even Speaker McCarthy does not want him to run for re-election. And just about every New York Republican has called on him to resign, his own party.
He doesn't like to listen to that, right?
He's the victim of a witch hunt, as he claims. So.
We have so much to talk. Come back again, would you?
Of course, absolutely. If invited, I will come.
Okay, Congressman Richie Torres, thank you. Good luck to everybody in the Bronx. We appreciate you being here.
Take care.
All right, coming up.